Dear learners, welcome to this session. In this session, I will start with the second block titled Tribal Society in Transition. The block titled Tribal Society in Transition consists of 4 units. It provides information about how the tribal societies in India have been in transition from the governance to the economy to the shift in the gender and class within the tribal society. It also points out the intersection between gender, class, and caste in relation to tribes. Unit 1 is about the tribal governance and polity. The unit helps us to understand the concept of governance with particular reference to the tribal group. It also attempts to explore the different forms and means of tribal governance. It will also provide you with an understanding of the concept of politics, while at the same time it will talk about the changing nature of the tribal politics in India. Unit 2 is about the tribal economy. It will describe the structural features of tribal economy in India. It will also throw light on the types of occupations followed by different tribes of India. It will try to explain the dynamic forces and process of economic change in tribal India. Unit 3 is about gender and class stratification in tribal society. This unit will throw light in regards to the meaning of gender and stratification, as well as it will try to explain the nature of class stratification among the tribal population of India. Unit 4 is about the intersection between gender, class, and caste in relation to tribes. It will talk about the meaning of class, caste, and gender among the tribal population of India, while at the same time it will draw out the relationship between class, caste, and gender among the tribes. In today's session, I will discuss about tribal governance. I will focus on elaborating the concept of governance and the different forms and means of tribal governance. India is a multicultural society where diverse groups of people differs in the basis of their social, ethnic, cultural and language identity. Given the nature of the Indian society, the idea of democratic decentralization and participatory governance assumes more importance in the contemporary development discourse. The decentralized forms of governance aim to make the process of local democracy more inclusive. It creates space for increasing participation and wider representation by various citizen groups that have been traditionally marginalized and excluded from the structure of governance and the mainstream political processes. Within this broader framework, it is pertinent to engage in discussion on tribal governance and polity in India. It is difficult, if not impossible, to discuss the nature of tribal governance and politics in India. This is because of the fact that the tribals are drawn from a variety of races such as Mongoloid, Australoid, and Negroid, which correspondingly resulted in different levels of integration within the society. This issue becomes more complex when we examine that the 645 tribal communities in India are at various stages of social, economic, educational, and political development. The practicality of tribal governance structure and the level of tribal participation in politics have close relationship with their social, economic, and educational development of the community in India. Let us first understand the concept of governance. Governance is a broader term. It has no settled or agreed definition so far. Broadly, it refers to the various ways through which social life is coordinated. The World Bank's document on governance and development defined governance as the manner in which power is exercised in utilizing countries' economic and social resources for development. The World Bank has identified three important aspects of governance: the form of political regime, the process by which authority is exercised in the management of a country's economic and social resources for development, and the capacity of the government to design, formulate, and implement policies and discharge functions. For UNDP, governance is viewed as the exercise of economic, political, and administrative authority to manage a country's affairs at all levels. It is about the process by which the government, the private sectors, citizens, and groups articulate their interests, mediate their differences, and exercise their legal rights and obligations. According to the Institute of Governance, an NGO based in Ottawa, Canada, governance comprises the institutions, processes, and conventions in a society which determine how power is exercised, how important decisions affecting society are made, and how various interests are accorded a place in such decisions. Governance can be defined as the traditions and institutions by which authority in a country is exercised. This includes the process by which governments are selected, monitored, and replaced, the capacity of the government to effectively formulate and implement sound policies, and the respect of citizens and the state for the institutions that govern economic and social interactions among them. Sometimes governance can be used interchangeably with government. In this context, governance is the act or manner of governing, the office or function of governing. To govern is to rule or control with authority, to be in government. So, governance is administration cum management, and hence more inclusive, more expansive, more citizen cum customer related, and more modern and contemporary. Let us now see the relationship between tribals and the governance. Governance provides enabling environment in which decision making and service delivery can be brought closer to the people. It represents a commitment to democratic institutions, processes, and values in order to ensure economic, political, and social security. The centralized structure of governance has failed to address the different tribal issues in one way or the other. On account of its many failures, the centralized state everywhere has lost a great deal of legitimacy, and decentralization is widely believed to promise a range of benefits. The public debate and discussion on local self government revolved almost entirely around the need to correct the multiple failures of bureaucratic and centralized apparatus of Indian developmental state, the failure to ensure the efficient and effective delivery of public services, to effectively provide and maintain key infrastructure essential for economic growth, to promote equity, and to eliminate the multiple deprivations associated with poverty. Without tribal peoples' commitment to policies, it is difficult to implement them. The argument for tribal people's involvement is based on the fact of quality of political participation, and therefore the public like itself will be substantially transformed only when tribal communities collectively debate and deliberate on issues of common concern and are provided with decision making powers to effectively address their shared concerns. So, there is a need for the local self government for tribal communities, which will not only involve them in the process of governance but also will authorize them to take decision for the development and empowerment of their communities. Local self government is essentially the empowerment of the tribal communities by giving them not only the voice but the power of choice as well, in order to shape the development which they feel as appropriate to their situation. The major promise of democratic decentralization is that it brings popular participation and accountability to local governance and therefore makes local governance more responsive to citizens' desire and more effective in delivering services. Let us understand the meaning of scheduled areas and the scheduled tribes. The term scheduled areas has been defined in the Indian Constitution as such areas as the President may, by order, declare to be scheduled areas under the Central Act. The criteria followed for declaring an area as scheduled area are preponderance of tribal population, compactness and reasonable size of the area, underdeveloped nature of the area, and marked disparity in economic standards of the people. The Indian Constitution has adopted Schedules 5 and 6 to deal with the governance and administration of tribal areas under Article 244. The Schedule 5 of the Indian Constitution was mainly adopted to protect the interests of tribal areas. It deals with the governance of scheduled areas specified in the states of Bihar, Madhya Pradesh, Gujarat, Andhra Pradesh, Orissa, Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, and Himachal Pradesh. The fifth schedule of our Constitution prescribes how to administer scheduled areas and scheduled tribes. There is a provision to set up a Tribes Advisory Council under 5th Schedule of the Indian Constitution. The Tribes Advisory Council consists of 20 to 25 members, among whom 3/4 are scheduled tribe members of the State Legislative Assembly. The objective of the Council is to advise the Governor in the matters pertaining to welfare and advancement of the scheduled tribes. It monitors and reviews the measures to be taken for the welfare of the tribal communities of the concerned state. Under this schedule, the Governor has sweeping powers to make regulations for the peace and good governance of any scheduled area, prohibit the transfer of tribal land, and regulate the business of moneylenders. The Governor may, after consulting the Tribal Advisory Council, recommend to the President repealing or amendment of any law made by the centre or the state as applicable to scheduled areas. The sixth schedule affirms that the Governor of the states having tribal areas can formulate autonomous district council and autonomous regional council for administration of tribal areas. The Schedule 6 of the Indian Constitution deals with the governance and administration of northeastern states such as Assam, Meghalaya, Mizoram, and Tripura. The establishment of the Autonomous District Council was accepted in the Constituent Assembly on three conditions. Firstly, the social customs and organizations of the tribal people were distinct from those of the non-tribal people. Secondly, there was a fear of exploitation of the tribal people by the non-tribal people on account of the latter's superior organization and experience in business. And finally, there was also another fear that unless suitable financial provisions were made or powers conferred on local committees themselves, the provincial government might not, due to pressure of the plain people, set apart adequate funds for the development of tribal areas. The objective of setting up of the Autonomous District Council in Tripura pronounces that the state government has to hand over certain administrative powers to the council in order that it may devote concerted attention to all aspects of development among the hill people and aims to remove within short span of time the material disparities that separate the advanced and the backward sections of the society and to emancipate not only the tribals but also all the deprived people from all types of injustice and exploitation. The main aim of the council is to develop the tribal areas at an accelerated pace so that imbalances and distortions existing between different groups of people may be removed. Generally, the autonomous district is represented by a particular tribe and the members should not be more than 30. Out of 30, 26 members will be elected through adult franchise and the rest 4 members will be appointed by the governor. But if there is more than one tribe in an autonomous district, then the governor can notify the area as autonomous region even within the autonomous district. The district or regional council has been given power to formulate the following kinds of rules related to distribution, acquisition, and use of land other than reserved forests. The rules include the management of all types of forests, the development of canal or other water sources for the purpose of irrigation, ban on jhum or shifting cultivation, constitution of Gram Samiti, Nagar Samiti, boards and councils, the development of village police, town police, education, health, sanitation, etc., the appointment of Mukhya or Pramukh, inheritance, marriage and divorce, social customs, and the constitution of the village court. In short, the autonomous district or regional councils are empowered to make law on different aspects of their day to day life. Let us understand the relation between the Panchayati Raj institutions and the scheduled tribes. Given their inferior position in rural society of India, the tribal communities were hardly able to participate in the local decision making process owing to the dominance of the privileged groups. The commitment towards popular participation in governance at the local level has been reinforced through recent policies of affirmative action, which have given an opportunity to marginalized and discriminated groups to express their voice and have a say in the making of policies that affects them. Measures of affirmative action following the enactment of the 73rd Constitutional Amendment Act 1993 opened a new chapter in the history of democratic decentralization in India by devolving power to the people, especially to the marginalized groups. Under Article 243D of the Indian Constitution, the 73rd Constitutional Amendment Act 1993 has introduced landmark provision of reservation of one-third seats for the tribal communities at the different levels of local self-government. The increased importance of participation in the panchayats through policies of affirmative action has necessarily increased the number of scheduled tribes in rural political institution of India. So, the institutionalization of Panchayati Raj systems since 1990s has added greater momentum to the decentralization process with the coming of the new generations of panchayats from 1990s. It is widely believed that tremendous possibilities have opened up in the areas of decentralization, development, social justice, people's participation, and grassroots democracy. The introduction of the local self government has widened the democratic base of Indian polity, and the scheduled tribes are entering and actively participating in the process of democracy. Before the amendments, the Indian democratic structure through elected representatives was restricted to the two houses of the parliament, the state assemblies, and the assemblies of the union territories of Delhi and Pondicherry. Now, there are nearly 600 district panchayats, about 6,000 block panchayats at the intermediate level, and 2,50,000 gram panchayats in rural areas. Today, in every 5 years, about 3.4 million representatives are elected by the people through the democratic process, out of whom about 6,60,000 are SCs and STs. With the introduction of affirmative action for the marginalized and excluded groups as a result of the 73rd Constitutional Amendment Act, the tribal communities the tribal communities of India are getting numerical representation in the local political institutions over the period. It also seeks to enhance participation of tribal population in panchayats and other local decision making forum. It has made substantive impact on tribal representation in India in the political decision making. The amendment has made possible the creation of political space, which has enabled tribals to gain in social structure, confidence, and to shake off age old stranglehold of repressive tradition. The Panchayati Raj institutions have been introduced to make the people self reliant and to involve them in the decision making process. Institutions such as hospitals, schools that have bearing on everyday life in rural communities, including the agriculture, animal husbandry, fisheries, micro irrigation, and small scale industrial sector, are still under the jurisdiction of the local self government. Panchayats are fully responsible for poverty eradication measures, the upkeep of local roads, running schools, supply of drinking water, and so on. The program's major achievements have all been pro poor, especially in the provisioning of basic services such as housing, sanitation, drinking water facilities, and poverty eradication. With the introduction of Panchayati Raj institutions, the tribal communities of India have been able to involve in important decision making activities like where should a development project be located, whom to give benefits from a developmental program, whom to give contracts, etc. To put it differently, it generates the opportunity for the tribal people to involve in their village development planning, resource mobilization, cash, kind, or labor for local development, and increasing the sense of responsibility for managing their affairs. Let us now understand the Panchayat Extension to Scheduled Areas Act 1996 and the Scheduled Tribes, with the intention of enabling the tribal society to assume control over their own destiny by preserving and conserving their traditional rights over the natural resources. The provisions of Panchayat's Extension to the Scheduled Areas Act 1996, in short PESA, came into force on 24 December 1996. The Act extends Panchayat Raj system to the tribal areas in 8 states, namely Andhra Pradesh, Bihar, Gujarat, Himachal Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, Odisha, and Rajasthan. The objective of the PESA is to enable tribal communities to safeguard their traditional rights over natural resources. The Act emphasizes the rights and ownership of people's institutions and respects traditions in the control and management of resources. PESA ensures that all developmental projects pass through local institutions and not through what is increasingly being seen as an ineffective and corrupt state machinery. The PESA attempted to vest legislative powers in Gram Sabha, especially in matters relating to development planning, management of natural resources, and adjudication of disputes in accordance with prevalent traditions and customs. It clearly states that a state legislation on the panchayats that may be made shall be in consonance with the customary law, social and religious practices, and traditional management practices of community resources. This significant legislation was expected to have far reaching consequences in the social, economic, and cultural life of tribal people in scheduled areas. For the first time, PESA gives radical self governance powers to tribal communities and recognizes its traditional community rights over natural resources. The Scheduled Tribes and Other Traditional Forest Dwellers Recognition of Forest Rights Act 2006, popularly known as Forest Rights Act or FRA, is a result of the protracted struggle by the marginal and tribal communities of our country to assert their rights over the forest land over which they were traditionally dependent. For the first time in the history of Indian forests, the state formally admits that rights have been denied to forest dwelling people for long, and the new forest law attempts not only to right that historic injustice but also give forest communities role primacy in forest management. This act is crucial to the rights of millions of tribal and other forest dwellers in different parts of our country, as it provides for the restitution of deprived forest rights across India, including both individual rights to cultivated land in forest land and community rights over common property resources. The FRA confers three key rights to members of scheduled tribes and others who traditionally live in and of forests: legal title to land cultivated forest areas before 13 December 2005, right to use minor forest produce grazing grounds and water bodies in forest areas, and power to conserve community forest resources and protect wildlife. By granting the legal rights, this legislative measure can act as a potential tool to empower and strengthen the local self-governance to address the livelihood security of the people, leading to poverty alleviation and pro-poor growth, and to address the issues of conservation and management of the natural resources. So learners, in this session I discussed the meaning of governance and the different issues that are directly or indirectly affecting the tribal self-governance in India. I have also highlighted different forms, means and institutions of tribal governance. Thank you.